Good morning, everyone. So we are finishing our summer session, essentially. And on Friday morning, I was going for a walk along the bay when I saw a strange sight. There was a raccoon was sitting completely motionless on the wall of the Coastal Beltway, this stretch of road that separates the city from the bay. That's what it's called. And he was just sitting on the wall, staring off into the distance, kind of in the direction of a group of high-rises that is clustered on a point of the bay. And he was just staring. You know, it almost looked as if he was wondering if it's a good idea to have so many buildings so close to the water. It makes for a very beautiful skyline, but I've wondered the same thing. And here, raccoons, they're like dogs. There's a group of them that lives on the man-made retention wall of the bay, and they come out in the evening to be fed by hand by the tourists and the locals that clearly don't have the same relationship with the raccoons that Americans have. And so these raccoons eat cat food, and they eat sausages, and they eat bits of burger and like French fries. And they go up to people without any fear whatsoever. They stand on two paws, and they beg for food. And so, you know, that's strange enough, but this raccoon really struck me. So I just stopped and I looked at him for a while, and he did not move. He was like this little mini gargoyle, furry gargoyle, just staring at the skyline, thinking private raccoon thoughts. And watching him, it reminded me of that teaching of Daido on the still point. And he would bring it up every time he would do the introduction to Buddhism at the beginning of the monthly introductory retreat. So people would come, and the first thing that they would experience after supper at the monastery would be beginning instruction. And then Daido Roshi would give an introduction essentially on Buddhism. And when speaking of Zazen, he would refer to this still point. And he always insisted, you know, that all creatures know how to be still, and that we have lost that ability to our detriment. He said, a still mind is unobstructed, always open and receptive. It doesn't hold on or attach to anything. At any moment in time, it is free. A still mind is unobstructed. At any moment in time, it is free. Please remember this. Many, many years before, the Buddha, in a similar teaching, said, I do not perceive even one thing, O friends, that leads to as great harm as an undeveloped mind. I do not perceive even one thing as harmful as an untamed mind, an unguarded, unprotected, unrestrained mind. I do not perceive even a single thing that leads to such great suffering and great harm as an undeveloped and uncultivated mind. That is quite a statement. And then, of course, he offers the other side. He offers the antidote. I do not perceive even one thing, O friends, that leads to such great benefit as a developed mind, a tamed, guarded, protected, restrained mind. I do not perceive even one thing that entails such happiness. And I think this last point bears repeating. I do not perceive even one thing that leads to such happiness as a trained mind, a protected mind. Also, quite a statement. Because he's basically tying these two, cause and effect. Train your mind, experience great happiness. So what does it mean to tame and protect the mind? What does it mean to truly guard it from experiencing harm and creating harm? There's a sutra called the Kolita Sutra, in which Magdalayana, who was one of the Buddha's main disciples, says, "Friends, once I was meditating, and this train of thought arose in my mind. The Buddha says, noble silence this, noble silence that, but what is noble silence? And then the thought occurred to me. There is the case where a student, stilling their thought, stilling their directed thought and evaluation, enters and remains the second jhana, rapture and pleasure born of concentration, unification of awareness free from thought, internal assurance. This is called noble silence." And this is quite a mouthful, but let's look a little bit at it. And I haven't spoken about the jhanas in quite some time. I mention them now and then. So let me do a brief recap. Jhana means concentration. It's the Pali for concentration, for samadhi, essentially. So it's not regular concentration, but it's concentration that unifies. Concentration in which subject and object merge. If you're following the breath, Sankai disappears, and there's only breath. If you're sitting Shikantasa, Komyu disappears, there's only awareness. You're sitting with a koan, cypress tree in the garden. Kurt disappears and becomes the cypress tree, becomes mu, becomes the sound of one hand. And of course, the question begging to be asked is, what does it mean to become something you're not? How do you even do that? Because here I am, clearly Zuisei. I'm not a cypress tree or a suspension bridge or the ocean. So how is it possible to become these things? And why is it useful? How does it help me? Could it be, to start, that my idea of what I am is not complete? Could it be that what I am is more than meets the eye? And this misperception of who I am leads to the suffering that the Buddha pointed. Just to take one small example of one famous passage in one famous text. And I have referred to this before. "Let us make man in our image," said God, "after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." Man, sea. Man, cattle. Man, bird. Dominion. According to this, they're all here to serve me. And it doesn't take much to see that right now we're paying for our misinterpretation of who man is, and that unfortunate word, dominion. What that text should say, humbly, is let them be stewards of the fish of the sea and the fowl of the air. Let them be caretakers, safekeepers. because man is not separate from all these creatures. And what he does to them, he does to himself. So this is how the Buddha describes the first jhana. Secluded from sense pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, a student enters and dwells in the first jhana, which is accompanied by initial and sustained application of mind and filled with rapture and happiness born of seclusion. I've always loved that because the jhanas, right from the beginning, they're saying this is going to be work. It's going to be work to forget yourself, but you will experience great happiness and rapture. And in fact, in this very session, some of you have spoken to me about that, of feeling the joy of having a unified mind. I have always considered that to be kind of like the reward of Zazen. It is such hard work. But at a certain point, something clicks into place and it feels good. Like you don't want to get up. It feels easy. And it just feels good. Good for you, but good like for the world. I remember years ago, somebody wondered out loud at the monastery, could it be that all of the people, not just us Zen practitioners, but all the many people who do contemplation, a contemplative practice of some sort, could it be that it's because of that we're keeping the world from teetering over the edge? Maybe. Maybe our work is keeping things in balance. You know, we're having to step it up a little more. But maybe. And so first, you seclude yourself, right? You retreat from everyday life, as we have been doing all weekend. You turn off your phone, you turn off the television, you turn inward and direct your mind. Where? Really to itself, to the workings of the mind itself, to what is going on in the mind, to what is going on in the body. We pay attention, very simply. And we don't fight what is coming up. We don't resist it. We just watch and take loving, loving care of what we see. How? By not judging it, by not beating ourselves up for the thoughts that we have, for our distraction, for our boredom, for our unwillingness to practice at any moment. We just hold it lovingly. We caretake it. For me, Zazen really is the best form of self-care because you're not denying anything. No part of yourself is forbidden in Zazen. Do you realize? I mean, in how many situations in your life do you actually experience that? Everything, anything that comes up, it's okay. It's okay. Because it's you, it's your mind. And without seeing it, without being aware of it, you can't do anything about it. And so first it's yes. Yes. To whatever it is. Then, what do I do with this? There are 5 factors of absorption that just come with the jhanas. Initial application of mind, which is very simply put your mind where you want it. That initial effort. I'm going to let go of a thought and put it on my breath. Put my attention on my breath. Sustained application. You keep it there. Every time you wander, you bring it back. In a sense, every time we're turning toward our cushion, we're engaging initial application. Because, you know, you could just go watch Netflix. You could go do any of a zillion other things. But the moment you turn, initial application of mind, for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, I'm going to train the mind and protect it. And then I'm going to do the work of keeping my attention there. Then rapture comes up, which is defined as delight and joy, in the object of concentration. It is that feeling, I hope you have felt it at some point. There's just this kind of upwelling of pleasure just in being there and doing nothing else but, let's say, following your breath. All of a sudden, you realize how incredibly full, rich the breath is, that there's a whole universe. And you could even feel this way about pain. How? I'm not saying go look for it. I'm not saying go rush toward it. Concentrate, get close enough to even a painful sensation, and it is possible to feel delight and joy. What? Happiness is the pleasant feeling that comes from becoming absorbed in our practice. And the difference between rapture and happiness, I've said this before, rapture is like seeing an oasis in the desert. So there's this sense of anticipation, a little bit of excitement. Like the sense of relief. And happiness is having arrived at the oasis. And so it's quieter, it's calmer, it's sated, it's satisfied. So initial application, sustained application, rapture, happiness, and one-pointedness of mind. Right? That's where you disappear and there's only breath, only awareness, only the koan. And this jhana, the Buddha said, is like taking a bowl of soap and suffusing it with water. So you have a bowl of powdered soap, and then you pour water on it, and then you knead it, letting the water suffuse it. Right? So your concentration fills body and mind, and there is rapture, there's a feeling of delight, but there's still effort. You are directing your mind, not this thought, but my breath. You are sustaining. You're doing. This is the first jhana. In the second jhana, you gain inner confidence and mental unification. So now you're getting closer. Free from initial and sustained application, you're no longer trying so hard, but still filled with rapture and happiness born of concentration. So this, the Buddha said, is like a river flowing naturally, or like a lake with no outflow. So water wells up from below, and it just fills the lake with cool water, naturally. There's really not much you need to do, other than be there, other than be the lake. Let the settled mind do its thing as it will. I promise you, if we let it, the mind will settle, because that is its nature. In the third jhana, rapture fades, and the student dwells in equanimity, mindful, and clearly comprehending. So, moment of insight, dwelling happily in the body. So still, it doesn't feel, this is not a burden, right? Zazen, our practice is not a burden. Like blue and red and white lotus flowers, some are immersed in the water, some are halfway up, some are all the way on the surface. And in every instance, cool water pervades their roots all the way to their tips. So essentially, no matter what is coming up in your mind, cool water is pervading the roots to the tips. The lotus flower just sits in that water. And the water just pervades their flower bodies completely. So here, there's no longer any effort, any striving, any concentration, any meditation. So you realize with each jhana, you're doing less and less, because there's less of you to do anything. And then the last one, you abandon pleasure and pain, joy and grief, and enter and dwell in a state which has neither pleasure nor pain, but has purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. So this is the mind where it is balanced and essentially ready. Ready for what? To see things as they are. Because that's the whole point of all this hard work. It's not just to feel good, but to see things as they are. And this is like sitting with a white cloth covering you from head to toe. You've let go of pleasure, of pain, of joy, of grief, of everything. And you just let your whole body be stable, bright. Now you can see things as they are. And so, just noble silence. Magdalayana said, noble silence is like the second jhana. Inner confidence and mental unification. Water is filling the lake naturally. You let the mind settle, because that's what it will do if you stop messing with it. And naturally, noble silence pervades the mind, pervades the body. And, my dear friends, if you are thinking, but that's not what my meditation is like, fear not. It does take time. It takes time for a lotus to bloom. And you can't force it. You can't grab it by the roots and yank it up. We have to trust. This is why faith really is such an important part of practice, even in Buddhism. You know, it's not faith in a higher being, that something is going to happen that is outside of you somehow. You trust that by returning enough times to this seat of the Buddha, by returning enough times to your mind, your own mind, by trusting your practice and the silence will pervade. And by silence, again, I do not mean absence of sound. It's a quieting, right? A stilling of that constant mental chatter, movement. And so that is why it is important to do sesshin, to do zazengai, to do even a half-day sit, because we need time to be immersed. And 20 minutes a day is excellent, but it doesn't give us the kind of depth that we need to really transform from the inside. So, you train the mind by applying concentration, by sustaining it, and then seeing what happens when you do that. Tilopa, I have quoted him in the past, the 10th century Indian master, has 6 points really of sustaining meditation, or he called them the 6 points of resting. Remember, I often say to myself when I'm feeling unsettled in any way, just rest your mind. And so he said the 6 points of resting are Do not recall, do not think, do not anticipate. Do not meditate, do not analyze, do rest naturally in the bright, luminous mind. Do not recall means to not get lost in our thoughts of the past. Right? The sutras say that the past is like a corpse, it's dead. And so at least for the duration of our zazen, our job is to let it lie. Rest in peace, my dear past. I don't have to go digging you up. Do not think means to not reflect on the present as it's happening. Annie Dillard, speaking about seeing, is saying it's like a person who's sitting at the bleachers of a baseball game with a radio pressed to their ear. So they're watching the game, but they're listening to the same game on the radio. You know, we're cooking a meal and we're talking to ourselves about every single step we're doing. Why? Why don't we just do the thing? Why is it so hard to just do the thing? So do not think, just do the thing. Do not anticipate means to not project into the future, right? The future is not born yet. We don't have to bring it prematurely into the world. And this instruction is not telling us not to plan. It's saying during the duration, for the duration of your zazen, stay where you are. Just stay. So the 3 times, those first 3 points deal with the 3 times. And then do not meditate means to not work so hard, right? But to rest in awareness, to rest on the breath without fabricating anything, without adding another layer. Because really, despite all the hard work, we're not doing anything special per se. We are really allowing the mind to do what it does when we give it space and time. And we trust, as we do this, that this moment, just as it is complete. Excuse me. That my body, as it is complete. My mind, as it is complete. That's why there's nothing I need to do, nothing I need to fix. Do not analyze is to not judge our state of mind, the quality of our zazen. To not get frustrated when our mind won't settle. To not get excited or restless or fearful when we start to get quiet. To not criticize or measure or compare the zazen period to that. Every moment, new. Every breath, life. It's neither good nor bad, it just is. It just is, and so is our zazen. We do not need any other reason to do it. We do it just because. How incredible is that? No ulterior motive. Which leads very naturally to the last point, to rest naturally with and in mind as it is, bright, luminous. Even when it appears dark. It is like the sky. It is open and free. But it's hard to see that when we're talking to ourselves. It's hard to see that when we're worrying or planning or judging or remembering. And so in Zazen, we train in the practice of truly being silent, of listening and seeing and feeling ourselves from the inside. So we can be archives of sanity. So we can hold our center, our ground, when the ground is shifting underneath us and quickly. So we don't get overwhelmed when things in the world get hard, when things inside us get hard. So that we can be a refuge to others. And to ourselves. I mean, this is perhaps the most important thing. All of this so that we can be a refuge, as the Buddha said. So let me end with this. It's called Behind the Word is Silence by Jenny Nabrowski. Behind the word is silence. Behind what sounds is the door. There is a back and a fold hiding in everything. And what was approaching fell and stopped away in closeness. An expression falls asleep and rises. And what was over there returns. It's a way to put the world back in its place. And something comes back when it should remain remembering. But if I ring the bell, water jumps and a river falls out of the water again, and the body rises and shakes. And the rock wakes and says, I sing. And a hand turns into a kerchief. And twilight and wind are companions. And this twilight appears amid lightning. Outside there is a bird and a branch and a tree and that lightning. Above all, there is noon without form. And suddenly, everything acquires movement. Two travelers meet and their shoes dance. And breeze and morning clash. And the seagull runs and the rabbit flies. And runs, and the current ran. Behind what runs is life. Behind that silence is the door. The door to what?